Hello, everyone. Welcome to Azure Community Live. Laurent and Esteban, you're live on the show now, so everyone can see you.
All right.
So let's do a quick introduction. Esteban, you want to start?
Sure. So excited to be here and have you guys here. So my name is Esteban Garcia. I work in Azure and DevOps here in the US. I'm based out of Orlando, Florida.
Laurent?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Laurent Bugnion. I work for Microsoft. I'm a cloud advocate, which means that we are basically taking advantage of all the amazing technologies that we have to create content and show our services and travel the world. And it's been a fantastic 2.5 years. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be talking to you about moving your database to Azure. But first, I think the other organizers want to introduce themselves as well.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself as well. My name is Geert van der Kruijsen. I'm from the Netherlands. I'll be your host for most of these streams that happen in the European time zone, so in the European evenings. And very happy to have Laurent here as the first guest. We're still missing one of the organizers, Lars Klint. Actually, as we speak, trying to add him to the call as well. This is our first time, so bear with us. But I think we have some great content from Laurent coming up. And well, if you're in the US, for example, we have another session tonight that Donovan Brown is going to do. But that will be, if you're living in the same time zone as me in Europe, that will be at around 12:30. I'm just keep talking until Lars picks up the Skype call, but well, I'll try to add him later on. First of all, thank you everyone for watching. Let me quickly see how many people are actually looking at this stream currently. 13 people. Well, it's the first time, so really happy to have you here. And I think let's just go to the content and switch over to Laurent. So I'll just switch to your screen.
Okay, and I'll switch my video off saving the bandwidth, so that I'm saving the bandwidth. So are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, fantastic.
All right, fantastic. Still has questions.
Cool. So
please do them on chat. So Esteban and I will check on the chat, so Laurent can just do his talk, and if there are important questions, we can interrupt them for you.
Yeah, that sounds great. I do have the chat open on the side window, so I can also take a look. But I'll be mostly concentrating on the content, like you said. So this is moving your database to Azure, and you might wonder about the design of the slides. And in fact, what I did here is that I'm going to present one of the sessions that we are showing at Ignite Tour. So we have this tour going on 30 different locations worldwide, called Microsoft Ignite Tour. How many sessions we have. We have like hundreds of sessions. Literally, it's a free event, and so in your city, feel free to come and say hi. It's amazing. Right now, my colleagues are in Seoul, in Korea. I just came back from London. We had last year already Paris, Sao Paulo, and Beijing, Tokyo, and the next week I'm going to Johannesburg. So we are going worldwide with that tour. And the content is online, so you can catch it as well as recording. But I thought it would be interesting to as an experiment also to show one of these sessions today, and those sessions are actually part of what we call some learning paths. I'll come back to the resource slide just later. And so as you can see, the learning path is about really migrating or modernizing your application, but really it's about migrating your application to Azure, enhancing that. And so here we are going to talk about the database part. If you find this interesting, we could also show the other sessions at the time. Okay, also find, and here is the resource slide, which is in line repo. You have where you can find video and slides. You can also find some environments that you can deploy your own subscription. If you want to try the demo is going to every take home pricings home, possibly show that to your colleagues. And here I see in the chat that the voice is breaking a little bit. It's going to be okay on this. Cool. So what we tell people is really that it's a great time to migrate to Azure. And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, we have in Azure than ever. And that's kind of the sentence which is always true, because since we keep adding stuff, next year we'll have more features than ever. But it's true, we have more features, more services, and we are also having some services. We offer some services to help you do the migration. Okay, and so it's not just about the features, but also everything around it, right? How you can easily migrate, and we'll see a demo of the database migration service, which is one of those services. Azure is global, so we have data centers in many countries, so you will always find a data center which is close to you. We are reliable and secure, and security is of course part of Azure at the core. There are multiple reasons why people migrate. Maybe your data centers are expiring. Maybe you have acquired a firm, or you have been acquired, and you need to combine hybrid data scenarios. And so on Azure, it's really easy to do so, because we offer a number of different data options, SQL, NoSQL, files, even, etc., blobs and all that. And then we also have services that help them communicate together. And I see that the audio is better now. That makes me happy. Maybe you have a need for capacity. Maybe you are a startup and you just start, and so you don't want to pay for things that you don't actually use. But then suddenly maybe there is you release something new, and then you have a lot of demand, right? A lot of people are excited about your new product, and so you have this need for capacity. And with Azure, you have the possibility to scale up, to reply to the demand, but you can also scale down very fast. And like this, you don't pay for things that you don't use. So it's quite convenient and nice. Software and hardware refresh, right? This is something that we can take off your hand, so you don't need to worry about that. We are going to push some that is correct. I am on Wi-Fi. We are going to push, if we have some security patches, etc. If server breaks, then we'll replace it. So it's basically something that you don't need to worry about anymore. Security threats, we have really very, very secure environment, both physical but also in terms of software. Everything's encrypted on Azure at rest. And then if you move the data, you can also very easily encrypt it with tons of different standards. But also in terms of physical security, of course, as you can imagine, nobody goes on the floor who is not approved, and literally most of the time there is really nobody on the floor. Those data centers are very, very secure. Compliance is, of course, a big topic. All right, we are compliant with a large number of organizations, and so there are a lot of things which are important, GDPR and all kinds of other compliance issues. Application innovation. So if you're on Azure, the nice thing is that you have a lot of possibilities to actually add innovation to your application. For example, with serverless or with all kinds of services around your application. So that's quite exciting. Software end of support, of course, you know that Windows Server and Windows SQL Server 2008 are running out of support, so maybe it's a good time to move. And this slide, just going quickly, just to show you a few of the many options that we have, both from the migration itself, for the building applications, as well as for data storage. And again, right, those are just a few of the options that we have. So the database migration service, we're going to see a big demo of that a little bit later. It allows you to migrate from on-premise, but also from the cloud to the cloud, and even, for example, from AWS to Azure. And it goes also for SQL and NoSQL. So we have also MongoDB support. We have PostgreSQL support. We have MySQL support that you can then migrate into Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database for PostgreSQL. Those are open source databases which are very, very popular. On the NoSQL side, we have Mongo to Cosmos, and we'll see a demo of that. And you can even migrate from Oracle into Azure SQL DB if you want. So you see that there are quite a lot of options here. Mention Azure Databox. It's an interesting option if you want to migrate. Those are basically physical devices that you order, and you can have the 100 terabyte or 1 petabyte option. The 1 petabyte comes on. It's so heavy that you cannot even lift it, and then you can put your data on it in your own data center. So it's very fast because you don't rely on the internet. It's very secure because you're at home, right, in your own premises. After that, you ship that back to us, and then we'll take care of putting the data in Azure. On the box, everything's encrypted, so it's very secure. And so it's an interesting option if you don't want to rely on the internet for speed reasons or for security reasons, for example. On the edge, we also have the possibility to run services on your premises directly, and then to have a link between services which run on your premises and in Azure. So it's just something that I wanted to mention. Okay, so Tailwind Traders, it's a fictional firm. It's the latest fictional firm that we created at Microsoft. They have acquired Northwind. So by acquiring Northwind, I'm sure that everybody have heard of Northwind. If you do data, you have worked with Northwind. And we have to agree that Northwind is a little bit outdated. Okay, they have not really followed, the newest trend of going in the cloud, at least partly in the cloud, of moving their data to new features, etc. So they have something which is still very much on premises. And now with the acquisition, Tailwind Traders becomes probably one of the largest fictional company ever. And of course, they are very dynamic. They want to move their data and to the cloud. You see that they have a very nice website where you can order all kinds of things, and we'll see a demo of the website in a moment. And they have an architecture right now which is hybrid, because they have already moved their web application to Azure. So they have a web application composed of ASP.NET Core and React.js. And they have a build process in place and everything. Everything's on Azure for the website. But when it comes to the data, it's still on premise. And so they have a virtual machine which is running MongoDB. And this virtual machine is running Linux. And MongoDB, NoSQL, they are using that for their shopping cart. NoSQL is great for shopping cart, for data which is fairly uncomplicated and very dynamic. And then they also have another VM which is running Windows Server 2012, so an old version of Windows Server with SQL Server 2012. And this is where they have their product description, everything related to the product, etc., etc. So this is what we are going to migrate. We are going to start by migrating the SQL data into an Azure SQL database. So this is a product description. And then we'll move the MongoDB, the shopping cart, into Cosmos DB, which is running a Mongo API. So I don't know if you know that, and we'll come back to that in a second, but on Cosmos, you can have multiple APIs. And here, the advantage of that is that we won't need to change the application at all. We are literally going to migrate the data and then change the connection string in the web application, and everything is going to work as is because we are using those Mongo APIs. And on the SQL side, of course, we are using SQL, which is very, very compatible with SQL Server running on-premise. So let's start with NoSQL. And Cosmos DB is what we call a globally distributed database service, okay? When I say globally distributed, it means that really from the start, we have designed Azure Cosmos DB to be global. And the advantage of being global are multiple. You can put the data closer to your users, so you're going to reduce the latency. But also in terms of reliability, if one of the data centers should suddenly disappear from the map because, disaster or just some stupid break, okay, I don't know, electricity goes down or something, by having your data in multiple data centers, you make sure that the data is still available. And we are going to switch automatically to the closest data centers available for your users. So like this, it's quite nice. Another good advantage of Cosmos DB is that it's a multimodal database service. So like I mentioned, we support storing the data in different models, key value, column family, documents, graph, to mention a few, and with multiple APIs. So if you are running right now an application on MongoDB, you can port it to Cosmos. And like I said, you don't need to modify your application's code. You just modify the connection string, and then it will continue working because those are compatible APIs. Same thing for Cassandra, Gremlin, etc., etc. So it's quite an exciting thing that we have. And also we have SLAs, we have service level agreement. So we are guaranteeing some values such as low latency, high availability, etc. So let's see the demo. So I'm going to go here to the portal. And first of all, I'm going to show you here this website. So this is an application service, all right? This is running on Azure already. The website is here. And here you see I added a debug header, which is showing me some IP addresses. And this is the IP address of the SQL Server and the Mongo server. So the Mongo server is running actually in a Linux virtual machine, and I can show you that. I'm going to go here. So for those of you who wonder what I have opened here, this is the Azure Cloud Shell. It's a shell where here I'm running Bash, but I could run PowerShell if I wanted to. And this is running in my web browser directly. I have access to my Azure environment. It's really super, super convenient because a lot of tools are pre-installed here. And it's really very, very nice. So I can go and SSH into my Mongo VM. Here we go. It's going to ask me for the password. All right. And now I am logged into my Mongo VM. So you see at the bottom it says Tailwind at mod 20 lb2 Mongo VM, which is the name of this Mongo. And then here I can decide to run Mongo. And so you see this is basically the source of my data. It is a Linux virtual machine. So I'm going to exit that. And now I can close this because I don't need it anymore. And for the target, this is the Cosmos DB where we are going to put the data. And we are going to see that in a moment. At the moment, there is no collection, so there is nothing in there. All right, let me just show you a few features of the website. I can here go and navigate to a subcategory. Let's open this commode. All right, I can log in to add things to the shopping cart. Okay. Don't want to save. And so now I can add to the cart. All right, you see the product was added. Let's go back maybe to another category, for example, plumbing. Let's see this kitchen stove. I'm also going to add it to the cart. And then if I go into my shopping cart, I can add some items. So for example, let's add here 3 wooden commodes because you never have enough wooden commodes. I think we all agree. And 2 kitchen stoves because, you know, I like to cook and my fiance also likes to cook. So like this, we can cook side by side, which is great. So this is our shopping cart now, saved in the Linux virtual machine, which is on-premise, literally under the CEO's desk. And now we are going to do the migration. So let's go to this window here. And this is here the database migration service, which I created using create a resource, just like you create any resource in Azure, okay? And then you see that I have no project at the moment, nothing here. So I'm going to create a new migration project. I'm going to enter the name. I'm going to say this is Mig Mongo. And then for the source, I have a number of sources. And those are the sources that I showed you in the slide earlier on about the database migration service. Okay, so I can migrate from SQL Server. We'll do that later. From Oracle, from AWS, from Postgres. If I choose from Mongo, then of course it proposes to me to migrate to a Cosmos DB. That's the only choice because this is NoSQL. Now we have here offline data migration, but you see we have a choice. We also have online and create project only. So create a project only, just create an empty project, not super interesting. Keep in mind this online data migration because we'll talk about that in a second. I'll explain to you why we have that. Right now I'm going to do an offline data migration. And let's go and create and run the activity. So now I need to enter some information. So first of all, the source of the data, I'm going to go in connection string mode. It's quite convenient. And now if I go and copy the connection string for my MongoDB, you see that it's horrible. It's not even secure or anything. So we'll have much better security on Azure. Let's go and save that. And now it's basically trying to connect into the MongoDB, into the Linux database. And now it's going to ask me to configure the target. So the target is a Cosmos DB in my subscription, and it's already found. So if I had a few here, Cosmos DB, I have 2. It's just proposing me one. It so happens that it's the one I want to use. But basically, it's extracting the connection string automatically. And notice that this connection string starts with MongoDB, with the MongoDB protocol. So even though it's a Cosmos DB target, I'm going to be using MongoDB as an API. And I selected that when I created the Cosmos DB during the setup. Okay, so now it's doing the same. It's going to try to connect to the target. And then it's going to ask me what database I want to migrate. So on Mongo and Cosmos, we work with collections. So here we have the source database. I could also change the throughput. So if it's a very large database that you want to move, maybe you want to throttle the throughput a little bit to avoid choking your target server. Here, it's okay because it's a small one, so I'm just taking the default. And now we see the collection. This is a card collection, and it's going to create a new collection in the cart, in the target. So I'm going to save that. And finally, I'm just going to give here a name to the activity. Let's call that Make Mongo as well. And I'm going to run the migration now. Okay, cool. So the migration is starting. All right, let's do refresh. Okay, it's just taking a few seconds because it's a very small one. All right, we see that it's complete, which means that now I can go back to my website. And now I'm going to switch the connection string because my target is ready. So I'm going to go to the configuration, all right? I'm just keeping an eye on the chat, and thanks so much for the comment. And hello, Adrien. I don't have M&M's with me here, but it's a private joke. They're in the kitchen. All right, no, just moving on. So here I have the settings for the web application, and you see this is where I have the Mongo connection string. So I'm going to replace that. And for the connection string, I can go in my target. By the way, if I refresh now, you see that in just a couple of seconds, we have here the card. So the migration has been successful. I can go to connection strings, and then I'm going to copy the primary connection string here, go back to the website, and simply paste here the connection string here. Let's click OK. I'm going to save. All right. And then it's just going to restart the web application. Now everything happens seamlessly, which means that the website can still be reached, but it's just going to take like a minute for the new configuration to be active. So while this is going on, I'm going to show you here the Cosmos DB a little bit more. So first of all, here we see the connection strings, passwords, everything is available here. And the other thing that I can show you here is the global replication. So here I have only one instance of the database. It's right there in Western Europe. Now that's making me a little bit uneasy because really if something happens, it's bad, right? If something would happen to Western Europe, which I don't hope because this is where I am right now, but you never know, bad things can happen, right? So hopefully I really want to have my data replicated in multiple locations. So let's put one instance in Western US. I'm going to put one instance in Eastern US. Now, I was recently in Sao Paulo, so I'm going to put this because I know that I have customers there. And I'm going to South Africa next week, so let's put that here. And for last, I'm going to put one in Australia East, as well in Singapore. And I can do that for read and for write. So the cool thing is that if I enable write multi-region, I'm also going to have very low latency when people are writing to the shopping cart. And that's pretty cool because when you shop, you want things to happen very fast. Now I'm going to save, and this is going to start the replication process. I don't actually have to change anything in my application because the connection string goes to a load balancer, and the load balancer is intelligent. It's going to know when the data closer to the user is ready. So right now I can leave it like that. The other thing I wanted to show you is a metrics. All right, metrics are where you can watch the health of your database. And I told you we have a service level agreement. And so here, for example, you see that we guarantee 10 milliseconds or below for read. And right now we're at 2 milliseconds. And we also guarantee 10 milliseconds or below for write. And right now we are around 5 milliseconds. So if the values go overboard here, then we are going to give you some money back. So it's a good place to watch, okay? Availability, we also guarantee 99.999% availability. It means that we allow the database to be down just a few minutes per year. So it's really pretty tremendous. And right now the availability is at 100%. And I really hope that one day we'll go to 100.0002%, but that has never happened. Crossing fingers. All right, so by now I think that my migration is complete. We know that. You see that the web application has restarted. I have the new Mongo server. My data has been migrated. We have our 3 wooden commodes and our 2 kitchen stove, and everything's working fine, which is great. So the shopping cart is good. Now, one thing that you may think is, well, that's not how you do migration, right? Because I showed you, the old data, and then I started the migration, and then I switched the connection string, and I talk, and it took a while. And all this time, maybe people were still buying stuff in the old database, and that data was not ported to the new database, right? So basically, for an offline migration, it's bad. I should probably switch off my website, showing a message saying, oh, sorry about that, but right now we're offline. And what do my customers do? They come, they try to buy something, they say, oh, the site is offline, they go to Amazon and they never come back, all right? So that's bad. So this is why, if you remember when I showed you the migration, I told you, oh, we actually have the possibility to do an online data migration. And if you do the online migration, it's really cool because what it's going to do is that it's going to take the source data, moving to the target, and then it's going to keep the source and the target synchronized. So once the target is ready, you can run, for example, a staging environment on your new data to try things out, to see if everything's running fine, okay? And then when you're okay, you switch the connection string. During these times, the source database and the target database are synchronized by the database migration service. And once the switch has been complete, then you can switch off the database migration service, and then you can discard your source database because you don't need it anymore. So that's why we have this online and offline migration. Here in the demo, I show the offline because it's a little bit faster. So for the sake of time, and also it's a little bit easier to configure. For the sake of time, it's easier this way. But keep in mind that you can always do an online migration, which is really very, very convenient. Okay, so let's go back to the slide, and I need to move this out of the way. Voila. And so here now we can, first of all, show you a few slides about here Microsoft Learn. So this is why you can learn about NoSQL in Azure Cosmos DB. Microsoft Learn is really awesome. It's free. You don't even need an Azure account for most of the modules. Some modules you need an Azure account, and so maybe you can take a free Azure account, and then you can learn, you can gather some experience points, and you can even get certified. So it's a nice way to learn. I just recently finished the Azure Fundamentals exam, which, believe it or not, I hadn't completed yet. And to do that, I learned here in Microsoft Learn, and it was really a very nice experience. Okay, let's talk about relational data now. And so if you remember in our demo, we have all the product description, which is in SQL. And so here, what we can do is have 3 different phases, right? First, we want to assess that the migration is possible because we have a very old version of SQL Server, 2012. Maybe we are using some features that are a little bit outdated by now, or that have not been ported to Azure SQL Database, or that are very, very advanced, and things like cross-database joins, for example, or compiled CLR, or these kind of things. And so for the assess phase, we actually have a tool which can help you. And this tool here, this is a video, so hopefully the frame rate will be okay. But this is a data migration assistant. It's an application that I installed on my Windows machine. And here I'm going to log into my database, and I'm going to do an assessment from SQL Server to Azure SQL Database. So I'm going to verify if the migration that I have in mind is even possible. And I'm going to verify here the database compatibility as well as the feature parity. So I'm entering here the IP address of the source. I'm entering username and password for the SQL authentication. And then the data migration assistant is trying to connect. It's going to ask me which database do I want to assess. And then I'm going to run the assessment. Here I speed things up a little bit. In the video, it's taking just a little bit longer. And it's going to verify that all the features that I have on my server are available in Azure SQL Database. And you see here, there is one feature which is not supported in Azure SQL Database. It's the SQL Server reporting services. Actually, it's okay for me here because it's not something that I'm using. But if I was using this feature, I might consider migrating to another version of Azure SQL Database, for example, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, which is a more advanced, more complex, and more complete version of Azure SQL Database. So we'll talk about that in a second. Just want you to know that Azure SQL Database has a huge momentum at the moment. It's a total marketing slide, so I'm going to go fast on that. But basically, it was already a couple of months ago that I got these slides, so it's probably bigger by now. We have already migrated thousands of databases using the DMS. Of course, you can also migrate using, backup and restore. So you see that we have 70 petabytes in size. So really a lot of databases. It's not something that nobody's using. It's really pretty advanced and popular. Now, earlier on, when I told you about the features, and I told you, I have one feature which is not supported in Azure SQL Database, I would have an upgrade possibility, which is the Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. So Managed Instance is basically a new flavor of Azure SQL Database. You still have the single instance database that you might know and love. Maybe you have been using it already. With Managed Instance, we have something which is even more powerful. It's also more expensive, but it's way more powerful. It is generally available, enterprise ready, and it provides a very, very easy migration path from SQL Server, even very old versions of SQL Server, all the way down to 2005 to the cloud, to Azure. Okay, it is a fully managed service, so it's a complete SQL Server running in the cloud, as complete as a VM, but it's not a VM, it's actually a platform as a service. And so you have all the advantages of platform as a service, such as advanced data security, all kinds of things. And so this really helps you during the migration phase. So we already talked about the assessment. When you migrate, you need to rehost your data, moving the data. Okay, that's a lift and shift. You need to refactor your application a little bit, at the very least change the connection string. And sometimes you also need to re-architect and rebuild your application because maybe the database is not compatible with your application anymore. With a managed instance, you eliminate that need. You don't need to re-architect and rebuild anymore because of the very, very high compatibility. And because it is a platform as a service, you can optimize later. For example, optimize the performance, optimize the costs, optimize security, etc., which are all things where virtual machines are a little bit less friendly. And so it's, our recommendation right now, it's really state of the art. So what is SQL Database Managed Instance? Well, it's a new member of the Azure SQL Database family, if you want. We had single database, we had Elastic Pool, and now we have Managed Instance. It is running on the same platform, which means that you can use the same tools, you can use the same, same SQL, you can use the same internal and external tools than with a single database. Same benefits, platform as a service, but in addition, you have an increased compatibility compatibility, almost 100% compatible, even with very old versions of SQL Server, all the way down to 2005, as well as, and that's another advantage for enterprise, full isolation and security. So we don't have any public IP addresses on those managed instances. It's all private. If you connect to your database, use either a VPN or express route, so something which is highly encrypted. And basically, it makes sure that your data is absolutely protected. It's your own private virtual network. It's as if it was literally on your premise, except that it's in the cloud and you have all the advantages there. Now, again, right, I mentioned that before. It's more expensive than a single instance. That's why I did my assessment. I tried with Azure SQL Database single instance first, because like this, I save money. But if I had an issue and I couldn't go into single instance for some reason, then I have the possibility to upgrade to managed instance. So that's good to know for the enterprise. Okay, so now with everything done, everything said and done, I should say, let's do the SQL migration. So I'm going to go back here. And this is my website. My SQL data is coming from this VM. All right, this is basically everything which has to do with the items here. And so I can go back to my database migration service. But before we do that, let me show you the source. So I have here opened a remote desktop connection to this Windows Server 2012. I have SQL Server Management Studio open here. This is a database that we are going to migrate. And basically, just to show you that I'm not cheating, everything is running in this VM. And for the target, we have this SQL database, and we'll take a quick tour of the SQL database in a moment. But right now, it is completely empty. There are no data in there. So let's go back to the database migration service. I'm going to go back to the same instance. And I'm going to create a new project. I need a new project because it's a new source and a new target. Let's call that MIG SQL. And for the source, I'm going to take a SQL Server. For the target, I have the choice here between virtual machine. So you could do a migration to a virtual machine from here directly. But because we want to be modern and go to platform as a service, we are going to take here an Azure SQL Database. Like I said before, if I had some feature parity issues, I could go to Azure SQL Database Manage Instance. All right, let's take again an offline data migration. Remember that we have online. Actually, here we are going to do a two-step migration. So we are going to start by migrating the schema only. So here it's going to migrate all the tables, definitions without the data at first. And it's a nice option to allow me to make sure that everything's okay. And now I'm going to create and run this activity. So again, same thing as before, we are going to select the source for the data. It is available in this IP address. Okay, so I can go here. I'm going to use SQL authentication, my username and my, Sometimes I can type and talk at the same time, but not all the time. So here we go. I entered the username and the password. It's logging to the old SQL Server, which is running in the VM under my CEO's desk. Okay, then after that, it's going to ask me to configure the target. So the target is my SQL DB, so I can take the server name from here. So let's take that and paste this. I'm also going to do the authentication. Here we go. Let's save that. And then after that, it's going again to ask me, okay, what do you want to migrate? Here I have only one database, so it's going to be very easy to choose. I have the Tailwind SQL Database, which I'm going to migrate into this SQL DB. The other one is just a backup. And here, as a reminder, I'm only migrating the schema at this time. So let's call that MIG schema. And then I can also configure here a validation option. To go faster, I'm going to say, all right, I don't want to validate the database, but in production, I would also validate just to make sure that everything's run fine. Okay, let's start the migration. It's pending. I'm going to refresh. It's running. I'm going to refresh again. Oh, Jeremy Leakness, my colleague, told me something. If you rotate your mouse cursor in the direction of the clock, apparently everything goes faster. So let's try that. Okay, let's refresh. I think Jeremy here is really not telling the truth, but It really takes just a few seconds because it's a small database, but we do have 5 tables, so we have a few. Now we are completed. So the schema has been completed. Now we can migrate the data. All right, so let's go back to the DMS. I'm going to take the same project because it's the same source and same target. And I'm going to add another activity. And this time I'm going to do an offline data migration. As a reminder, I could also do an online data migration if I wanted to keep my database alive during the migration. Here it doesn't really matter because it's just a product description and I own both databases, so it doesn't really matter here. Let's enter the password again. The rest stays the same because it's the same source. I'm going to also enter the password for the target. All right, same thing as before. Voila, but it's the same target. And then I can select which tables I want to migrate. So as I told you, we have 5 tables in this particular application, so it's not a huge database. I'm going to take this Tailwind SQL. And here I can set the source database to read only, which is providing me basically a little bit more security. Just make sure that nobody modifies the data while I'm doing the migration, which is good during an offline migration. And in that case, because nobody's going to modify, nobody's continuing like with the shopping cart, I didn't want to do that. But here for the product description, it doesn't really matter. So I set it to read only. Okay, here are the tables that we are going to migrate. And finally, I'm going to call that mig data. And I'm going again to say that I don't want to validate. And now I'm going to run this migration. All right. This is again going to take a couple of seconds. It's quite fast. See, it says pending. Let's wait for a moment. All right, here we go. Pending. And we are celebrating our 200 subscriber on the YouTube channel. This is amazing. Oh, it failed. Why did it fail? I'm not sure. It failed because of some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but I am prepared because I don't want to waste your time and go and check why it failed. Maybe there was some authentication issue. I'm not totally sure. Usually it's fairly safe. Now, I actually prepared very well, and I have a backup database. So this backup database, I already pre-migrated it. So if you allow me, and again, right, we should see succeeded here. And if we were seeing succeeding here, I would just go back and change the connection string. In that case, I'm going to go and take this backup database where I already did the migration. And again, sorry for the failure. I'm not sure exactly what went on. I will go back and check the logs. So in order to change the connection string to this one, I can go here and see the connection string here. But you see that it says your password here. It's actually safe. It doesn't show the password. So I cheated and I actually prepared here the connection string. So I'm going to take it. Let's go back to the configuration. All right. I'm going to go into my SQL connection string. You see that this is still the old one, which has the IP address. Okay. Let's go and paste that. And now I'm going to connect to the backup connection string, to the backup database. Let's save this. Again, it's going to take just a second to restart. And while this is doing that, I'm going to give you a quick tour of this database. So what I can show you is, first of all, we can take a quick look at the health of the database. All right, right now there is really nothing much into it because it's just starting with the migration. We can also do some geo-replication, and so it depends a little bit on the subscription you selected. So here I can choose basically another location, and here you see that I have another location in Northern Europe for failover. So it's not exactly the same as in Cosmos DB, where you have also the reduced latency, the global write, etc. Here it's more for failover, but still it is a security. If Western Europe should fail for some reason, then we get Northern Europe. And by the way, the data in Western Europe is also replicated automatically in 3 different locations in the data center, and depending on what you choose for your replication options. You can also choose to have the location in one region in different data centers. So you have a lot of possibilities to make sure that your data is resilient if a data center should fail. All right, another thing I want to show you is the advanced data security. So this is one of the huge advantages of platform as a service. We have the possibility to configure here a vulnerability assessment, for example, as well as other security options. And here we see that this assessment is going to run periodically. And we see that we have some critical checks, all right? We have two high-risk things. And if I go and check them out, it's going to tell me, for example, that auditing should be enabled at the server level, and absolutely it's true. I should absolutely do that. It's going also to tell me that, what does it say here? The server level firewall rules should be tracked and maintained at a strict minimum, which is true. So it's going to do some vulnerability assessments regularly, and then it's going to send me email and tell me, hey, we found something weird. It's going to give me a lot of different things, like for example, it's going to check if there are some some scripting attacks, if there are some denial of services, if there are some invalid logins too often, for example, which is weird. Maybe it's a hacker trying to connect, or maybe it's a robot or something. So it's going to give you a great security. So that's really nice. And this is only one of the many features of platform as a service. So Azure SQL Database is really very, very advanced. So now if I go back to my website and refresh, you see that now I'm using here the Azure version of the production of the data, okay, of the product description. Everything works the same as before. In fact, I just refreshed, I didn't do anything else, and then I have all my description working. But this time it is coming from a totally different source in Azure with all the advantages of the platform as a service. So it works great. Okay, so except for this failed migration, which I'm sorry about, but again, right, I cheated before. I'm not sure exactly what happened. But apart from that, everything works great. So that's awesome. Here is a Learn Alert where you can learn about SQL, working with relational data in Azure. Again, you can gain some experience point here. It's pretty cool. You see that this particular learning path lasts 3 hours and 20 minutes more or less. So it's pretty consistent. And you have also a lot of other learning paths around SQL. Now, I want to take a moment to mention our open source database engine, or rather, it's not our open source. Oh my God, I didn't say that. Our basically Azure database support for open source database engine. We are very grateful that there are amazing communities developing fantastic products such as MariaDB, MySQL, PostgreSQL. But we also know that people love to run those on Azure because of the the availability, because of the global replication, because of the security assessments and everything. And so if you are using one of those open source database engine on your premise, just know that you can also migrate them to Azure Database and take advantage of all that. So that's really awesome, especially PostgreSQL. We love PostgreSQL. In fact, I don't know if you know that, but some of the maintainers of PostgreSQL, of the open source project, actually work for Microsoft. So we are very, very supportive of those initiatives here. And it's a very, very popular open source database that we are very, very happy and proud to support on Azure as well. Okay, here are some documentation about PostgreSQL. So if you want to know more, there is also documentation, of course, for MySQL, for MariaDB. So everything is available here. And finally, if we go back to our agenda, I showed you some of the features that we have in NoSQL and in SQL. We talked about Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, Cosmos DB. We also showed you the service that we have, the database migration service that you can use to do the migration. And finally, I hope that you had in this short session, 45 minutes, an idea of the global replication, the reliability, the security that we have. So everything is checked. I'm very happy about that. In terms of resources, first of all, you can get certified. So we have actually curated a number of resources that you can use to get certified as an Azure Data Engineer Associate. So if you go to this URL, this is where you can get certified. Here are more learn modules, this time about securing your cloud data. Like I said, Azure is secure by default, but you can always be more secure. And here you can learn advanced techniques to make your data even more secure. So it's quite nice. And finally, we have also some other resources. Because it's platform as a service, you have a number of resources you can use to manage your cost, see where you can save some money. We are going to make you some recommendations as well. Maybe you can switch off your virtual machine at night because you're not using it, or maybe you have a database that you can scale down because you're not using it to its full extent, etc. If you have already Azure licenses on-premise, Azure SQL licenses on-premise, you can actually use them in the cloud. This is what we call the Azure hybrid benefit, and you can save up to 55%. So it's quite a lot of money that you can save here. So make sure to check it out. We have some save money buttons a little bit everywhere in the portal, so you can make sure to check it out. If you want to move, but you are not totally sure how to get started yet and how to convince your CFO and your CTO, this is a great place to get started. It's the total cost of ownership, and there you can basically build a case. You can select what you use in terms of network, in terms of capacity, etc., etc. And then it's giving you a very nice formatted PDF report. You can even add your own logo if you want, and then show that to your CFO and say, see, you see, I spend like a lot of time preparing this. Actually, we help you a lot, but still you don't need to say that. And then you make your case to migrate to Azure. And finally, Azure Migrate. This is the central hub for everything migration, not just for data, but also for virtual machines, for website, for everything. We have tools, we have partners that you can get. Again, the resources, if you want to get and try this demo at home, you can go to the GitHub repo, and then you can deploy the environment that I just showed you. We have some buttons to deploy. It's a one-click deploy to your own subscription. And then after that, try things out. Everything is described there. You also get the slides and some videos of this presentation there. So that's about it. It was 45 minutes, 48 minutes. So if you have questions, I'd love to hear them. I believe that there is a certain lag, though, from what I can observe. So I don't know, organizers, if you want to comment about that. So far, I didn't see any questions except the sticker of the virtual kitten, which has been answered. So I don't know if there are some questions that you want me to answer, or if we just follow up offline. That's also a possibility. I don't hear you, Gert. I don't know if you are muted right now. I don't hear anybody, actually. I'm going to leave the resource slide for a moment. Okay, anybody want to say something? Nothing to say? Everybody's happy? All right, so I guess I'll just conclude here. No, I cannot, still not hear you, Gert. I don't know what's going on. Well, better you than me, I assume, right? Okay, so he says, I see the thumbs up sign. So I think we are going to sign off here. If you have questions, please feel free to connect to this website on top, the aka.ms/mod20. I'm not sure if you can connect there if you have not been to the tour, but if you can connect there, you can ask questions there. And I thank you so much, Azure Community Live. I love you too. Otherwise, you can also feel free to reach out. Yeah, hello. Yeah. So if you want to also reach out to me on Twitter, I just want to finish with that. My DMs are open. So if you have a private question, you can also send it to DMs, or just let me know. My Twitter is Bugnion, and maybe I can quickly show that. Here, let's do that, and twitter.com/lbugnion. So this is where you can reach out to me.
It's on the video as well, right? So it's
on the video as well, exactly. So this is where you can go and talk to me and ask questions if you want. It was really awesome to give you this presentation. I hope it was useful, and yeah, back to you, Gert. Am I saying your name correctly? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, my name is Geert, but I don't mind.
Geert, okay,
nobody
Geert.
else, nobody not from the Netherlands is able to pronounce my name, so that's fine.
Yeah, same thing for me with my own name. So.
Could you enable your webcam again?
I can. Here we go.
Okay, yeah. Well,
all right.
thanks, Laurent. I thought it was a great talk. Yeah, really lucky to have you on our first episode. Yeah.
I'm very excited to be the first, and if people want to stay awake and look at Donovan's presentation or catch it offline later, I think it's probably an amazing presentation that he's going to give. He's a fantastic presenter, so I can only recommend to go and check it out.
Yeah, it's if you're in the European time zones, it's like 12:30 at night. So yeah, it's quite late. I'll be there because it's not our first time, but then for the US, and Esteban will live stream it. Esteban had to drop out during this session though, but yeah, so we're still experimenting with all the technicalities. So in the beginning we had a little bit of problems with the sound, so I was able to fix that, I think. By doing that, I removed some of the microphone stuff and removed my microphone, so that's why you weren't able to hear me at the end.
I see.
That was fixed now.
Well, as for me, I can only congratulate you and Esteban and Lars for starting this initiative. So and if people want to drop, feel free. I know that in Europe it's time for dinner slowly, so don't worry about it. But what I can tell you is that within the advocate community, we are always talking about offline content versus, I should say online content versus in-person presentations. And one thing which is really hard is there are a lot of concerns about traveling. Like, it's costly for sure, but it's also not so good for the environment, right? And I do believe that, and I mean, I can talk having flown a lot of miles last year and flying more miles this year, and I cannot. And even though Microsoft offset that carbon, and you saw the announcement recently about getting green and offsetting the carbon, and even going carbon negative by 2030, I believe, or 25. It's amazing, but it's still a concern, right? And so we try to balance this, and I think that having this type of online initiatives is absolutely fantastic, as well as for accessibility, right? Not everybody can go to a conference, and of course you can catch those conferences very often after the fact as an offline video, and Ignite, for example, the whole content is online, etc. But it's not quite the same as having a live presentation, the possibility to ask questions during the presentation, and all that. So I really want to congratulate you on starting this initiative. I think it's fantastic. And by the way, if you do need also a host at some point, and you, for example, are not available in the European time zone, feel free to reach out to me also, and I'll be very happy to help you with that. But I think it's fantastic. It's a great idea. So I'm really proud and honored to be part of that.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really honored that the Azure DevOps or the Azure advocates are really into helping us as well. We want to create this community as something for the community and by the community. So we're really hoping on both sessions from people from within Microsoft, but also we're very happy to have sessions hosted by people from the community who have some knowledge to share. Everyone who's working with technology learns stuff by just doing it on their jobs, right? And we think it's really important for everyone to share it. That's why we want to open this up for experienced people, but also first-time speakers from every groups, minorities, whatever. If you have some knowledge to share around the topic Azure, we will try to make a place for you to share your knowledge. That's why we started with this with the three of us, Esteban, Lars, and me. We're all from a different time zone. I live in Europe, Esteban's in the US, Lars is in Australia. So we can cater for sessions like all over the world in each time zone, right? That's what we're trying to aim for with this community, and we hope, that this is the first one of many. As we said, Donovan Brown is up next tonight. which we try to cater for the American time zones. Next week, this time zone, we have Jakob N. From Sweden. He will do a session on event-driven on Kubernetes. So that will be really interesting as well. So hopefully you will join for that session as well next week. We will create the live stream somewhere today and send out the invites and times, but it will be somewhere Tuesday next week.
Awesome, absolutely, and I can't wait to see this initiative developing. Thank you so much for organizing again and for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for having you, Laurent. So with that, we're going to sign off. If you want to do a session yourself on Azure Community Live, we do have a call for papers online. Please check out our website and fill in the form, and then we will try to arrange having you on the call as well.
I just want to say that even though Lars is not on the call right now, he's still virtually with us, and so he just sent me a message via Facebook. So he
So most of the chat was actually done by Lars. He woke up just when we started because it was like 5 a.m. for him.
Yeah, and for once having Lars muted is not bad, right? I don't know what you think, but it's actually kind of relaxing. I'm just joking, of course. I love to hear Lars talk. So
okay.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks,
have a good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.